Hello, good morning. This is Andrew from the Musicto Grieve 2 playlist. I'm back as ever with Sharon from Grief Reiki. Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning. Happy Monday to you.
Yes, happy Monday back to you. It's going to be a good week. I have a good feeling about this week. In fact, I've got a good feeling about the next few months. Actually, I've got a good feeling about the next few years. It's going to be awesome.
Yay.
But with my natural optimism, one of the things that I was chatting with a lady last week, and she had just come back from seeing her mum, and her mum must be in her late 80s, and they're dealing with Alzheimer's. And it was the emotion that the lady that I was speaking to with had about how to deal with this, and she was just finding it so difficult, and not just in the physically what you have to do, but just what she called the guilt of how she deals with that. And I was thinking, aha, it's not guilt, but it's the unresolved grief. Well, we will talk about this a little more, but I mean, I'm guessing you must come across this a lot. So not a lot, but I mean, how would you start when you're working with somebody with the grief that comes with Alzheimer's?
Wow, there's so much, right? And you're really looking at a couple situations. One is you're grieving for the loss of the person prior to the Alzheimer's or dementia kicking in. So it's the person that they used to be. And if there is any unresolved issues, it's very difficult to what we call complete those issues because the person is no longer the same person anymore. So you're grieving for that. And it's very normal to feel unresolved grief, because if you were expecting an apology, or if you wanted to make an apology, or if you wanted to, just say, I love you, that person that you knew is not there anymore. So the chances of that actually happening is very difficult. Plus there's that whole hopes and dreams for the future, right? I mean, you're dealing with a person who's not the same. And so you're trying to wrap your head around what this, mom or dad or person that you love very much, what they're becoming, which is not somebody that you recognize. So there's sort of this anticipatory grief that people go through as they watch the change, and as they really know, I mean, there's no cure for this yet. And so they're going to die. And so not only are you grieving the person that they become, but you're grieving the person that they are because of the disease. And then you're also grieving for the fact that they're going to die at some point soon. And so all of this wrapped up into one is just an emotional roller coaster. My heart goes out to anybody who's dealing with a loved one with these diseases.
It's interesting. I would suspect that this actually, the grief from Alzheimer's might actually conform closer to the 5 stages, because it's almost the diagnosis of a terminal illness, isn't it? Because it is. You're right. There's no cure at the moment. And so the idea that you would go through denial and then anger and the depression actually makes a lot of sense. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think so. And again, when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross put the 5 stages together, it was really for a person facing their own terminal illness. But I think in the case of Alzheimer's and dementia, they don't have any recognition really of what they're going through themselves, the person that's going through it. So I think it's the family that goes through those stages, maybe the denial or whatever. And instead of it being linear, it's just, all over the place, and every day is different. And the person actually becomes somebody they don't know anymore. Plus they don't know, their loved ones. And so there's this real, grief over the person that you've lost. And yeah, I can see how for sure somebody would definitely go through, those stages as they're watching their loved one, get closer and closer to death.
Right. And there's also there's the selfish, it's not selfish, but you're going along living your life, and you've always been the child, and they're the parents, and then it gets towards the end and it flips, doesn't it? Because suddenly now they're the child, and you weren't not possibly not even budgeting for that, but what I meant was you hadn't allocated a plan for that, And that can cause quite a strain as well.
Oh, I mean, I'm just thinking of when my dad got, my dad fell and was in the hospital for almost a month. And certainly I wasn't a full-time caregiver, but I was there, in the hospital with him. And I just got a new appreciation for people who are in the situation where they are caregiving for somebody like that. And especially with Alzheimer's and dementia, I know family members want to do a lot of that caregiving for themselves. And sometimes that's impossible. And so they have to make a decision, to put their loved one in a special assistance home. So there's all kinds of emotions that must be going through their heads with all of this. And caregiving is so unappreciated. I mean, I really have a different respect for people who try to do that. It's you've got your own life, and then you've got this life you're taking care of. And it's just, I can't even imagine how they get through the day.
Right. And it's, I'm going to bring up the G word again, because again, speaking with people in this situation, you have what they perceive to be the guilt of, I just can't look after you anymore. I mean, it's literally killing me. And so that decision to put them in a home, this idea of, I'm not putting my mother in with strangers, but at some point, how do you manage that? I mean, clearly it's the best thing for them, because if you can't sustain it, but it feels awful, and people have a lot of angst and emotion and what they call guilt about that.
Well, I'm a firm believer of speaking about all of this long before these sorts of things happen. And culturally, we're not very good at doing this. I mean, I've already have, like I said, my death file. I've already got a plan. If something like that happens to me, I know what I would want my family to do. And so the difficulty is because people don't talk about it when it happens, and then all these emotions are running around, and then you have to make a decision. You don't really know maybe what that person wanted, or maybe you weren't able to have that discussion with them. So in a lot of cases, people feel, caregivers feel, family feels like maybe they're giving up on their loved one, that they should just stick in with it until the very end. And you're right, it's impossible. There's no way. I mean, I've had friends who've tried to do that, and eventually they had to put their loved one into, a special assistance living arrangement. And there is a difficult feelings and emotions that go with that. And I think if those conversations, and we don't know what's going to happen to any of us, right? But if you don't have those conversations with your loved ones prior to some sort of diagnosis like that, or when that diagnosis happens, if you can still have the conversation, it's so important to have everybody on the same page. Not that it makes the decision easier, but I think knowing that you've talked to your loved one about it and they understand at that point in time does relieve some of those unresolved feelings that you might have.
Right. I mean, it's interesting when you go to the hospital and everybody is familiar with the DNR, do not resuscitate if you come out, and that's made. But you're right. I mean, particularly with Alzheimer's and dementia, I mean, if you don't have those conversations up front, when they're on the other side of that particular Rubicon, I mean, you're right, you can't have that rational conversation, can you?
Right. No, you can't. And it's heartbreaking, because I've heard stories of, I have one client who's taking care of a 94-year-old mother at home, and she's watching her progress. And it's been years that she has Alzheimer's, but she's watching her progress to a place where she knows she's not going to be able to do it anymore. I mean, she gets up, she wanders around, she may try to leave the house, and for her own safety, her mom's safety, she realizes, I'm going to have to make that decision. And it's devastating. I mean, it's devastating, even though it's the right thing, because those emotions, the grief that goes with it, it's that future that you wished you could have had with that person. And now that it's not going to happen.
It's this is going to happen, though. I mean, and this is the bit that that I guess until you go through it yourself, you don't really know. It's like, I listen, to the heartbreaking story of your client with a 94-year-old mother, But at 94, you'd think, my God, that's an amazing run, isn't it? I mean, that you know this is coming, and yet it's still incredibly hard.
Well, I think it goes back to we've been taught to deal with grief with our head and not our heart. So logically, we can rationalize, oh yeah, she's 94. Oh yeah, she's got dementia, Alzheimer's, she can't take care of herself. Oh yeah, for safety reasons, it means that she can't be in my house anymore. But from your heart perspective, you're still heartbroken. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to give up taking care of my mother. I have to put her into a home. She is going to die at some point. And that realization from a heart perspective, not a head perspective, that's a much tougher one to deal with. I think people can logically deal with it, but when it comes down to the heartbreak, that's really what's the most difficult thing, is dealing with the emotions associated with it.
So how do you work with the emotions? How do you work with the heartbreak?
Well, you have to feel it, and that's the hardest part, because you're trying to be a caregiver and you're trying to be quote unquote strong, and you're trying to do all of the things that you need to do. I know my client said she's just kind of sucked it up, right? Which isn't good, right? And so that's why we're obviously seeing each other. It's a way for her to let those emotions out in a safe place, because she doesn't want to be crying around her mom, even though her mom may not understand what's going on. She needs to have a safe place to cry and to grieve. And a lot of times we tell clients, to write a letter to the mother that the mother used to be, the person that they used to be, and then to write a letter to the person that her mother has become with Alzheimer's, and sort of get all of those unresolved emotions out and try to separate the two, because they aren't the same. It isn't the same person anymore. And so you're really talking to two different people.
It's very interesting. Again, I mean, I like the two-letter approach. I mean, that's a technique that, writing a letter is a good technique, but writing the two different letters to the different states, that's super interesting. I mean, what's been your experience of that? How do they generally differ?
Well, the first one is typically if they've had a positive relationship with their parent, right? Because not everybody has positive relationships with their parents. Some people have very tumultuous relationships with their parents. And then it only gets worse, because the emotions that the Alzheimer's patient is going through can be anger and things, which exacerbates an already difficult relationship. So that makes it difficult as well. But I think remembering the person and thinking of, the fond memories that you have, and remembering the wonderful things that they did for you, and, being complete. And that's one of the things about the work that I've been taught to do, is always being complete with people, always apologizing, always, forgiving, and always saying those things like, I love you, or I'm upset with you, always saying those things before you can't say them anymore. And so if you're writing those two letters, it's because you haven't been able to say it to the old, the former person, and then you want to say it to the new person. Like, I forgive you for not being the person that you used to be. I forgive you for your anger. I forgive you, Alzheimer's, for taking over my mother's life, So it's a cathartic thing, because you can't really sit down with your mom or your dad or your loved one and say it to them anymore, because they don't understand. So getting it out is really a healthy way of dealing with those emotions.
I mean, takeaways for me today, I mean, it's planning again, isn't it? I mean, it's the whole, we're doing this because the more we talk about it, the more it pushes out into the world, more people talk about it, the better. And we recognize, let's have a death file. Let's plan just in case, one of us gets Alzheimer's, or what do we want? I mean, there's that. But also there's the cathartic element, that grief is coming one way or the other, and, you've got to find a way to deal with it.
Exactly.
Okay, so On that, the track this week is a Carrie Underwood track, and it's called Forever Changed, and it's dialed into this Alzheimer's space. And I think if you're looking for, I mean, country is a great place to go if you're looking for a torch song, or you're looking for a song that's designed to tear at your heartstrings. And it's one of those classic piano, driven ballads. And the lyric will be massively familiar to anybody who's dealing with, family with dementia and Alzheimer's. And they say that she finds it too emotional to perform live, which is, interesting. I wonder what she's been through, but check it out. And finally, so what's happening with Grief Reiki this week, Sharon?
Well, this week on the Grief and Healing Corner, I have a very special guest, you. And so on tomorrow at 11, I'm very excited to switch the tables and allow you to have a chance to talk more about music too, and music to grieve too, and your story. And I'm excited to share that with all of the viewers tomorrow on Facebook.
Super cool. All right, so that's tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific time, over on the Grief Reiki page. I will obviously share it on this page as well. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sharon. Have a great week, Sharon. I'll see you tomorrow, and everybody will see you next Monday.
Thank you.